this crazy world, it's so hard to unwind. So I'm taking time just for me. Gonna find my peace, let my soul be free. In the quiet moments, that's where I'll find a little room to breathe, leave it all behind. Give me room to breathe, I need some time to heal my heart, to clear my mind. Gonna love myself, yeah, I believe in the power of me. Just give me room to breathe.
Great new day to all my self-care friends and family. Welcome back to another Room to Breathe podcast. I am your host, Life Coach 614, and I am so happy that you've made space to be here with us today. Now, before we jump into today's episode, I need for you all to do me a quick favor. If you are feeling the vibes, go ahead and show some love. Tap the screen, like, comment, but most importantly, I need for everyone to share this out with someone who could use a little healing energy today. And if this is your first time here or you haven't done so already, go ahead and hit that follow button. Subscribe to our channel so that way you are always tapped in when a new episode drops. I also want to personally invite each one of you to visit our digital home at the selfcareclub.org, where you will find everything you need from affirmative apparel to motivational merch, as well as a ton of free resources to help nourish your growth and remind you that you are supported every step of the way. Just know that you don't have to do this alone. We are healing in community, growing one breath, one moment, one day at a time. So today, I encourage you to give yourself permission to make space for peace, for growth, but most importantly, to make room for you. And remember, if anything in today's episode hits home, be sure to drop those green hearts in the chat. That is our community's way of saying I am healing, I am growing, and I am showing up for me. Now, let's get ready to breathe, reflect, and grow together. Now, listen, I've been sitting with some reflections that were or are inspired by a book by Big Sean. I don't know if any of you have read this book. It is a book that I actually promoted in our Self-Care Club community last week. Let me hold this book up here for you guys. So the book is called Go Higher. And in this, y'all listen, I'm just saying, Big Sean has dropped some gems in this book. Let me flip this camera so you guys can get your screenshot over here real quick. Bear with me. There we go. Okay. So the book is called Go Higher: 5 Practices for Purpose, Success, and Inner Peace. Y'all, this book, like, okay, one of the things that I remember, which is what we're kind of talking about today, which, you know, again, sparked today's conversation. Big Sean said, right in the middle of trust is you. I'm going to say it again. Right in the middle of trust is you. And so when y'all think about the word trust, literally the you is the center of the word, right? So it's kind of like a play on words. And I'm not even going to lie to y'all. Like, when I heard that didn't just sound good. Like, it really sat with me. That phrase alone just kind of challenged me. And I think that it also exposed some things to me. Because if you really think about it, we spend so much time focused on everybody else when it comes to trust, right? Why can't I trust people? Why do I keep getting hurt? Why does this keep happening to me? Right? And yes, those are real questions, but they're not the root questions. Because trust is honestly, the truth is a lot of us aren't struggling with trusting others as much as we're struggling with what happens after we ignore ourselves. So, like, I think that the real question becomes, do I trust me? Do I trust what I feel? Do I trust what I see? Do I trust myself enough to move accordingly, even when it's uncomfortable? Because I think that's where everything shifts. So today we're not just going to talk about trust on a surface level. We're going to get into self-trust. We're going to talk about self-betrayal. and the patterns that we repeat when we don't listen to ourselves, and what it actually looks like to stop abandoning yourself just to hold on to people who already showed you who they are. So I think that, today's conversation is going to be a real one, right? It might feel a little bit personal, but it's also, I think, where our power lies. So before we start, I'm going to encourage you to just take a deep breath in through your nose, exhale from your mouth. And I want you to do that again. This time, release whatever you've been holding on your chest. Breathe in and out. All right, let's get into it. Elevated Awakening Brooks, welcome in. So we're just going to start with the hard truth about trust, right? And I'm going to say this with love, but I'm also going to say it and be real. Most of us don't actually struggle with trusting other people. We struggle with trusting ourselves after we've ignored what we've already felt. Because if you go back, really go back, not the edited version of your story, not the version of your story that you've told other people, but that honest version, there was a moment, right? A pause, a hesitation, a feeling that you couldn't quite explain, but it was there. Okay, Coach Shishi, right? It was there. And welcome in, Carmen. It was there, right? Maybe it was like that pause or something inside of you said, pay attention, slow down, that this don't feel right. But what do? We overrode it, right? We overrode it. We said, maybe I'm just overthinking. Maybe I don't want to assume the worst in this situation. Let me give them a chance. And listen, I know that extending grace is a beautiful thing, but extending grace at the expense of our own awareness, that's where things start to break down. Because, that's where I think that things get a little diluted or confusing for us, right? You ignore your intuition once, then you do it again, and then again. And before you know it, you don't even recognize your own voice anymore. Now you're confused. Now you're second guessing everything. Now you're asking other people, what you should do. And you're asking people what you should do about situations that your spirit already gave you clarity on. And see, that's how self-trust erodes. Not all at once, but in small, quiet moments where you chose comfort over truth. Thank you. And a lot of times we don't ignore our intuition because we're clueless, right? We ignore it because we already know what it's going to require from us, right? If I'm acknowledging this feeling, that means that I might have to walk away from that relationship. If I tell the truth about what I'm experiencing, that means I might lose this person. If I honor what I feel, that means I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. So instead of choosing the truth, we choose delay. We stay longer. We hope harder. We wait for proof that we never actually need it. Yeah, change is scary. That's why a lot of us stay comfortable in the chaos. We make it, livable. And so when things finally fall apart, now all of a sudden we say, I can't trust nobody. People always hurt me. Why does this keep happening? But if we just shift that perspective a little, what if it's not that you can't trust people? What if you haven't fully learned how to trust yourself yet? Because here's, this is the empowering part. If the issue was only other people, you'd be stuck. But if the issue is self-trust, then that means you have the opportunity to rebuild it. That means that you can reconnect. That means that you can start listening to yourself again and actually start moving differently. So I want you guys to sit with this question. I don't want you to rush past it. I want you to ask yourself, honestly, when was the last time you felt something was off and you ignored it? And you can take that even deeper and answer, what did it cost you not to listen? And this isn't to shame you, right? It is to bring awareness, because awareness is where the healing starts. And we're not avoiding the work anymore, right? Not this time. But again, I know that self-betrayal hits different, and let's just talk about it, right? Because this is the part that people don't always want to say out loud. It is easy to call it heartbreak. It is easy to say they hurt me. They did me wrong. They played in my face. And all of that can be true. But there's another layer of this that hits deeper and quieter and honestly a little heavier. And that's the self-betrayal. It's the realization that somewhere along the way you left yourself behind, trying to hold on to something or someone that was already slipping away. Because nothing stings like looking back and knowing that you saw the signs. You felt the shift. You noticed the inconsistency. You picked up on the energy, and instead of honoring that, you explained it away. You made excuses for it. You minimized your feelings just to keep the connection alive. Now you're dealing with what you allowed, what you tolerated, and how long you stayed disconnected from yourself. And see, that's the part that'll have you sitting in silence like, damn, I knew better, right? Not in a way that shames you, but in a way that wakes you up, because you did know better. Your body knew, your spirit knew, but you were trying to make something work that required you to shrink, to bend, to ignore the process, ignore you in the process. So what happened? You kept showing up, you kept giving, kept pouring, and eventually you hope that it would just feel different, hoping that eventually they would meet you where you were. And in the process, you slowly started abandoning yourself piece by piece. See, self-betrayal doesn't always look dramatic. It's not always one big moment. Sometimes it looks like staying quiet when something bothered you, laughing at things that actually hurt you, accepting less than what you needed because you didn't want to seem like you were asking for too much. It looks like saying yes when your whole body is screaming no. It looks like choosing their comfort over your truth. And every single time that you do that, you send yourself a message that your voice, your needs, your boundaries are negotiable. And so over time, that adds up. You start feeling disconnected from yourself. You don't trust your decisions. You question your instincts. You feel lost in situations that once would have had clarity, right? Things that you once would have had clarity in. And it's not because you're broken. It's because you've been overriding yourself for so long that your inner voice now feels distant. And now you're trying to rebuild something within you that never should have been compromised in the first place. But this is the part where compassion comes in, because we're not about to sit here and beat ourselves up, right? You didn't betray yourself because you were weak. You did it because you were trying to love, trying to hold on, trying to make something work. You did it because you saw potential, because you believed in people, because you had hope. And there's nothing wrong with that. The issue isn't that you loved deeply. It's that you didn't always protect yourself in the process. And I think that that's the shift that we're making now, right? Not closing your heart, not becoming cold or acting like you don't care anymore, but learning how to love without leaving yourself behind. Learning how to stay connected to your truth even when your feelings are strong. Learning how to recognize that something is costing you too much and having enough courage to step back before you lose yourself in it. Because at the end of the day, it's one thing for someone to hurt you, and it's another thing to keep hurting yourself trying to prove something, fix something, or hold on to something that's already showed you it's not aligned. And we're in this season of what, y'all? If it don't align, I decline. Right? We're not doing that anymore. Not after we've come this far. Not after you've survived everything that was meant to destroy you. Not after everything you've already had to heal from. So if you're being honest with yourself right now, where did you abandon you just to keep someone else? And more importantly, what would it look like if you chose yourself sooner? I mean, your mailbox this morning, I be trying to stay in the neighborhood, bruh. For real. I do. I be making my rounds all through the neighborhood. So yeah, I got a message for you. And let's talk about why we don't trust ourselves. All right. We'll take this a little bit deeper because this isn't just about, what happened in one relationship or one situation. We're going to talk about them patterns, right? Let's talk about that conditioning. This is about the stuff that got planted in you long before you even knew it was a question. Because the truth is, a lot of us weren't taught how to trust ourselves. We were taught how to be agreeable. We were taught how to be likable. We were taught how to survive environments that required us to stay small, stay quiet, stay compliant. So now as adults, when it's time for us to listen to ourselves and stand firm and move with conviction, it feels foreign. Right. Listen, we be wanting external validation. You right. Some of us grew up in spaces where speaking up got you labeled as disrespectful, where questioning things made you difficult, where having emotions meant that you were too sensitive. So what you learn to do? You learn to override yourself, right? You learn to filter your truth down in a way that would make other people comfortable. You learn to doubt your own perception before you even gave it a chance to be valid. And so now here you are, grown, trying to navigate relationships and decisions and boundaries, and you're second guessing everything. You're out there looking for, as bro said, external validation, looking for reassurance. You're asking 10 people what they think before you make a move. You're waiting for confirmation outside of you for something that your spirit has already confirmed inside of you. And that's not because you're indecisive. It's because you were conditioned to disconnect from your own inner authority. And while we're talking about it, let's go ahead and talk about trauma for a minute, because trauma plays a role too. When you've experienced hurt, whether it was abandonment, betrayal, abuse, inconsistency, emotional neglect, whatever, your nervous system gets used to chaos. It starts to recognize dysfunction as familiar. So when something feels calm, steady, or healthy, you question it. But when something feels confusing or inconsistent and intense, you lean on into it because this feels like something that you've already survived. So I know what this is. I'm going to just go ahead and roll over here. So now your instincts fell off, not because they are, right? It's because you've been trained around survival. You weren't trained in safety. Lady Blue, welcome in. That's why you can feel something is wrong and still stay. That's why you can recognize red flags and still negotiate with them. That's why you can say this ain't right and still try to make it work. Because a part of you learned that, early on, that love requires endurance, not alignment. And then there's the fear piece, because fear plays a role in it too, right? Let's be honest about that too. Trusting yourself requires action. And we know that action comes with consequences. And if I trust what I'm feeling, then that means I might have to walk away. If I honor my boundaries, that means I might have to disappoint someone. If I choose myself, I might lose access to the people, places, or situations that I've grown attached to. So instead of moving, we stay. We stall. We sit in limbo. We gather more evidence, and we wait for something undeniable to happen so we don't have to be the one to make the call, right? But here's the truth that we don't want to always face. Sometimes the first feeling was already enough. You just didn't trust it. And I want to gently shift something for you right here. Your intuition is not the problem. Your discernment is not broken. You're not bad at choosing people. You've just been operating from a place where your voice had to compete with fear and conditioning and survival patterns. But once you become aware of that, everything starts to change. Because now you can pause and ask yourself, is this my intuition speaking, or is my fear trying to keep me, in what's familiar? You can start noticing when you're about to override yourself. You can start catching those moments where you're about to explain away something that doesn't feel right. And that's where the rebuilding begins. Thank you. And it's not about perfection, right? It's not in always getting it right. It's about choosing to listen to yourself a little sooner than you did last time. Because every single time that you do that, you're rewiring something deeper than behavior. You're reclaiming your voice. And that's how self-trust starts to come back home. And y'all, if we being honest, them red flags don't be hiding. Okay? They don't be sneaking. They don't be under the cover. They be right there in our face. Like, hey, how you doing? It's me, red flag. Right? The problem is we don't always want to see them for what they are. Because if we did, that would require us to respond. It would require us to make a decision. It would require us to choose ourselves. And sometimes we're not ready to do that. So instead, we negotiate, right? We soften it, we reframe it, we give it context that it didn't ask for. Right, we be like, maybe it's orange. Is that pink that she got on? Agony, welcome in. We say things like, oh, they just had a bad day. They've been through a lot. They didn't mean it like that. Maybe I'm expecting too much, right? But if we slow that down, it's not expecting too much. You're not expecting too much at all. You're recognizing too much and trying to talk yourself out of it. Because here's the truth. When something is aligned, you don't have to convince yourself to feel safe in it. You don't have to constantly explain it to yourself. You don't have to keep adjusting your standards to make it make sense. When it's not right, it's not right. But instead, what happens? We start working overtime in that overthinking, over-explaining, over-accommodating, trying to make something feel right that your spirit has already flagged as wrong, right? And I get it. I really do. I really, really do. Because listen, I'm speaking to a former version of me, right? Making excuses. Yeah, this was me. I had to learn that sometimes those red flags were attached to the people that I cared about. Manifesting stability. Welcome in, CC. I really had to learn that sometimes those red flags were attached to the people that I loved, people that I've invested time in, people that I saw potential in. And, if I'm being honest, it was really hard to accept that, what I hoped for, or I guess to say what I hoped for versus what I was experiencing didn't match. Right? And so I had to make a choice. You can hold on to the version of them that you want them to be instead of accepting who they are and who they're showing you they are right now. And if you do, that's where you get stuck. Right? And it's not because we're blind. It's just because we're hopeful. Right? We are hopelessly, in love with potential. But see, hope without boundaries, that'll have you tolerating things that can slowly chip away at you. And the thing about red flags is they rarely show up as one big obvious moment, right? It's usually a pattern. Inconsistency, lack of accountability, mixed signals, disrespect, disguised as jokes, energy that shifts depending upon, what you need from them, or more importantly, what they need from you, right? It's typically subtle, but it's steady. And every single time that you notice that, and you choose to ignore it, you teach yourself to disconnect from your own discernment. Now you're not just dealing with their behavior, but you're also dealing with the internal conflict of knowing that something is off and staying anyway. That tension, that confusion, that anxiety, that's not you being too sensitive. That's you being aware and not acting on it. And let me also say, this might be the part that hits a little different. Sometimes we don't ignore red flags because we don't see them. We ignore them because we don't trust ourselves to handle what comes next. If I acknowledge this, then what? Do I leave? Do I confront it? Do I risk losing this person? So instead of answering those questions, we stay. We sit in situations that require us to constantly adjust ourselves just to keep the peace. But peace that requires you to shrink is not peace. It's just quiet discomfort. And I think that each and every one of you deserve more than that. You deserve relationships, environments, and connections where you don't have to negotiate your worth just to maintain access. So let me ask you this, and I want you to be really honest with yourself. What have you been trying to make sense of that doesn't actually make sense? And how much longer are you going to keep explaining away what your spirit has already made clear? Because the moment you stop negotiating those red flags is the moment that you start honoring yourself on a whole different level. So let's talk about what self-trust actually looks like, right? Let's bring this theory out of theory, I guess, into real life. Because self-trust sounds good, but what does it actually look like when you're trying to live it? Because it's not just about affirmations. It's not just about, I trust myself, notes in your little notes app. Self-trust is actually a lifestyle. It is a series of decisions. It is how you show up for yourself when it would be easier for you not to. And again, let's be real. It doesn't always feel empowering in the moment. Sometimes it feels uncomfortable, lonely, even a little bit scary, because you're breaking patterns that once felt normal. So self-trust looks like walking away from something that still has potential because it doesn't have consistency. And that's hard because potential will have you holding on to what could be, while ignoring what is. But self-trust says, I'm not building a future on possibilities that haven't shown up in the present. I mean, can we really call it potential if they haven't even shown us that it's possible? Tania, welcome in. It looks like saying no and not circling back to explain yourself 5 different ways just to make someone else feel better about that boundary you set. Because it already took you courage to say no in the first place. So it's not your job to water it down just so it's easier for somebody else to accept. No, period. Right? Because we know that no is a complete sentence. And the more time that we spend trying to negotiate that is more time wasted. Right? Self-trust looks like believing your feelings the first time they show up instead of waiting for them to escalate into something undeniable. You don't need things to get worse just to justify your discomfort. If it feels off, that's enough to pause. If it doesn't feel right, pause. That is enough for you to reassess the situation. It is enough for you to choose differently. It looks like not chasing clarity from people who move in confusion. Right? A lot of us, I don't know, I think we've exhausted ourselves trying to understand people who are inconsistent and unclear and emotionally unavailable. But self-trust says, if this is confusing, I don't need to decode it. I just need to step back from it. Right? I don't have to be the one to kind of figure it all out. This is not my riddle. This is not my puzzle to solve, right? So I just need to step away from it. Let it work itself out. Elevated Awakenings, Monique, welcome in. Self-trust also looks like choosing peace over being chosen. And I know that this one hits because sometimes we want to be picked so bad that we ignore whether or not the situation even feels healthy to us. But self-trust shifts that focus. And it says, I'm not waiting to be chosen. I'm doing the choosing. Right? I choose me. And that's the thing that I had to really learn the hard way. I was so busy waiting for someone else to choose me, pick me, want me, love me, that I didn't even realize that I had not even chosen myself. I didn't pick me because I kept putting them before me. I didn't love on me because I was too busy chasing after them to love on them. So in turn, I didn't want me. I just wanted someone else to want me. So I had to actually sit in a season of solitude to realize if I don't love me, why should anybody else? It didn't mean that I wasn't worthy of love, but if I wouldn't show up and love on me, how can I expect someone else to? And so in that season, I learned that I'm not waiting to be chosen anymore. I'm doing the choosing. And at first, I choose me. 10 out of 10. Every single time, I choose me first. And here's another one I think that doesn't get talked about enough. Self-trust looks like disappointing people. Yeah, because when you stop overextending, when you stop saying yes out of obligation, and when you stop saying or stop being available, and to other people in ways that drain you, people notice that, and not everybody's going to like it. So sometimes putting you first means that you're going to disappoint other people. But I want you to hear me when I say this. People being disappointed in your boundaries doesn't mean that your boundaries are wrong. Thank you guys for the gifts. It just means that they were benefiting from a version of you that you're no longer willing to be. And that's growth. right? It's just like the seasons change, things change. And in order for us to grow, we must shift things. Welcome in, Paulette. And self-trust also looks like consistency with yourself. Not perfection, not getting it right every time, but just catching yourself quicker. Recognizing when you're about to slip into an old pattern and choosing differently, even if it's just a small shift. Maybe you don't stay as long. Maybe you speak up sooner. Maybe you pull back your energy instead of overgiving. See, those small changes, they add up. Because every single time you honor yourself, even in a small way, you reinforce something deeper, right? It's the knowing that I can rely on me. And that's the goal. Not trying to control everything, not to avoid, getting hurt completely, but to know that no matter what happens, you're not going to abandon yourself in the process. And so I want to check back in with you. I want you to check in with yourself right here, actually. I want you to ask, where in your life have you been waiting for permission to choose you? Where in your life have you been waiting for permission to choose you? And what would it look like to move differently? Not perfectly, but intentionally. Because we know that self-trust doesn't happen overnight. It's built every single time you decide that I'm not going to ignore myself this time. That I'm going to put me first this time. And we have to understand that sometimes we keep showing up for everybody but ourselves. You're dependable. You're the one that people call. You're the one who always checks in. You show up. You remember all the details. You are the one who carries the emotional weight like it's part of your job description. Elevated Awakenings Butterfly. Welcome in, Mars. And so on the outside, that looks like strength, right? Carrying all of that. But on the inside, who can admit that they're tired? Is there anybody else in here who is tired of being the strong one? And I'm not just talking about physically. I'm talking about emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Tired. Mars said, hell yeah, I'm just tired, right? It's because you've mastered how to be there for everybody else while quietly disappearing from yourself. Because, who really checking on the strong one? Nobody. Right? And we know that it doesn't always feel like abandonment at first. It feels like love. It feels like loyalty. Papa Smurf, welcome in, bro. It feels like this is just who I am. Right? But over time, it turns into depletion. You start noticing that you're pouring into people who don't pour back. You're making space for people who don't have room for you. You're showing up in ways that are not reciprocated. Thank you. And instead of pulling back, what do? We lean in a little harder. We give a little more. We try to fix it because that's what we do. We the fixers, right? We Olivia Pope that shit. You try to earn the same energy that you're already giving out to everybody else so freely. And that right there, that's where you lose yourself. Yeah, you got to do it. Like I said, this is the part where we lose ourselves. Because now, all of a sudden, your worth is getting tied to how much you can do for other people instead of how well you're doing with yourself. Right? So even when you're overwhelmed, you keep going. Even when you need rest, you keep pushing. Even when something feels off, you keep showing up like everything's fine. It's cool. And guess what? nobody questions it because you've trained them not to. You train people to expect your availability, your flexibility, your emotional labor. So the moment that you start pulling back, it feels like you're doing something wrong, but you're not. You're just doing something different. And different feels uncomfortable when you've been conditioned to overgive. And listen, y'all, let's be honest about something. Sometimes we show up for everybody else because it's easier than showing up for ourselves. Anybody can admit that? Show of hands. It is easier to be everything to everyone else than to be anything in your own life. Because showing up for you requires stillness. It requires honesty. It requires you to face all the things that you've been avoiding. And that's not always an easy thing to do. It is easier to distract yourself with other people's problems than to sit with your own needs. You said it feels selfish. It can. Because again, like I said, it requires us to face what we've been avoiding. And that's not always an easy thing to do. But the truth is, you cannot keep pouring from a place that you keep abandoning. Eventually, something is going to catch up with you. Be it burnout, resentment, emotional exhaustion, that quiet feeling of, I don't even recognize myself anymore. And see, that's your signal. Not a signal that you failed, but the signal that you've been overextending yourself in ways that are no longer sustainable. So what does the shift look like? It starts with awareness, right? Just noticing when you're about to say yes and your body's saying no. Noticing when you're over-explaining instead of standing firm. Noticing when you're prioritizing someone else's comfort over your own peace. And once you're aware of that, then it's about choosing differently. Not dramatically, not all at once, right? But very intentionally. Maybe it means you just don't answer the phone right away. Maybe it means that you say, let me get back to you. Maybe you start creating space where there used to be an automatic access. Because access to you is a privilege, it's not a requirement. And the people who truly respect you, they will adjust, right? And the ones who don't, they benefited from a version of you that didn't have boundaries. And that's okay. Because you're not here to be everything for everyone, right? You're here to be whole within yourself first. When was the last time you showed up for yourself the same way that you show up for everybody else? Not when you had to, not when, everything else was handled, but I'm talking about when was the last time you intentionally showed up for yourself in the same way that you show up for everyone else? Mine was yesterday, y'all. I decided to show up for myself and recognize that I needed a break, that I needed rest. And I could have pushed through and showed up and did the podcast and conducted my meetings for the day, but I just simply decided no. If this was anyone else, I would tell them to take a break, relax. I would remind them that the world is not going to stop spinning just because they need a break. And so I told myself that yesterday. And y'all, I was really pushing. I was ready to get up and go live and do all the things. And then I said, something inside of me screamed, we not doing that today. I realized that I deserve the same care, the same consistency, and that same energy. And listen, the moment that you start giving that to yourself, everything else begins to shift. Not because the people have changed, but because you have changed. Yes, Butterfly. She said, yesterday I celebrated me. I cleared my throat and spoke my truth to my daughter. Absolutely. Cam says, school is an easy excuse to decline without feeling guilty because they didn't help with college. Yeah. Trying to scroll back. I feel like I missed another comment. Excuse me. But again, you guys, it's all about rebuilding trust with yourself, right? This is the part that I think actually brings healing together, because once you see the patterns, once you recognize where you've been overriding yourself, that next question simply becomes, how do I fix this without starting from scratch or feeling like I'm starting from scratch? You're not starting over. You're just returning to yourself, right? That whole return to center. Because that voice that you've been ignoring, that intuition that you've been second guessing, that sense of this doesn't feel right, that kept pushing down on you, it never left you. It just got quieter the more you ignored it. So rebuilding self-trust isn't about creating something new. It's about reconnecting with what has always been there. And that just starts small, right? Not with some big dramatic life change, not with cutting everybody off overnight, but with consistency in the little moments. It just looks like pausing before you respond, checking in with yourself before you commit, and honestly asking, how do I actually feel about this? Instead of saying, what should I do? Because for a lot of us, we've been operating off of shoulds for so long that we don't even know what we actually feel anymore. So we're relearning that. And listen, you're not going to get it right every time. Hey, Cynthia, elevated awakenings to you. We have to understand that we're not going to get it right every time, and we shouldn't be expected to. We're not perfect. No one's perfect. So there are going to be moments where you still override yourself. There are going to be times where you still fall back into old patterns. And that does not mean that you failed. That just means that you're in the process. But what matters is how quickly you come back to yourself. Water break? Okay, I got you. Brooks be keeping me on my toes. She'd be like, sip your water, coach. So again, what matters is how quickly you come back to yourself. Do you catch it sooner? Do you correct it quicker? Do you extend yourself grace while you're still holding yourself accountable? Because that's growth. Rebuilding trust isn't about perfection. It is about reliability. It is about showing yourself, I may not get it right every time, but I'm not going to ignore myself like I used to. Right? I'm not going to deny myself what I know I deserve. And see, over time, that builds something solid. A lot of people struggle to trust themselves because they're still holding on to the guilt from their past decisions. You know, that I should have left sooner. I knew better. I wasted my time. And that is the guilt that keeps many of us stuck. Because how can you trust someone you're still judging? So part of rebuilding self-trust is forgiveness. Not excusing what happened, but releasing yourself from the constant replay of what you could have done differently. Right? Because you made the best decision that you could with the awareness that you had at the time. Now you know more. So now you move differently. Rebuilding self-trust also means keeping your word to yourself. And I'm not talking about like big promises. I'm talking about the small things that we overlook, right? Saying you're going to get rest and then actually resting. Saying that you're done with something and then not circling back out of loneliness. Saying I deserve better and not entertaining less because it feels familiar. Every single time you break a promise to yourself, even a small one, you just reinforce doubt. No fear, no doubt. Perfect timing. Welcome in, bro. And see, every time you keep a promise to yourself, you reinforce trust. And over time, that becomes your foundation. You've got to learn how to sit with your decisions without immediately looking for reassurance. Because when you start trusting yourself, you won't always have confirmation right away. You might feel uncomfortable. You might question yourself. Hell, you might even wonder if you made the right choice. But instead of running back to what's familiar, you stay. You sit in it. You let the clarity come from within, not from that external or outside validation. That is how your confidence grows. So again, let me ask you this. What's one small way that you can start showing up for yourself differently? Not perfectly, not all at once, just intentionally. What is one small way that you can start showing up for yourself differently? Because rebuilding self-trust isn't about becoming a new person overnight. It is simply becoming consistent with the person that you already are. And the more you do that, the more you'll realize that I can depend on me. And once you have that, everything else becomes a choice, not a need. Right? So that goes back to the beginning, right? Let's bring this conversation all the way home, because this is where everything shifts if you let it. We started this conversation with a phrase from Big Sean. Right in the middle of trust is you. And that's not just a clever line. That's a mirror. That is accountability. That's empowerment all at the same time, right? Because if you're the center of trust, that means your relationship with yourself is the foundation of everything else in your life. Not your relationships, not your circumstances, not how people treat you. You. Thank you for the gifts. And the reason this matters so much is because a lot of us have been living life like we're on the outside of our own experiences. We're adjusting to people, reacting to situations, waiting on clarity, and, out here hoping things line up, instead of recognizing that we are the constant in every situation that we enter. Everywhere you go, there you are, right? Every relationship that you've had, every decision that you've made, every lesson that you've learned, you were right there in the middle of it. So if you don't trust yourself, everything feels unstable. You question your choices. You doubt your direction. You look back and second guess instead of standing on what you decided. And that creates this cycle where you are constantly seeking security outside of yourself, but never really feeling grounded. But when you start seeing yourself as the center, not the afterthought, everything changes. You stop asking, do they choose me? and you start asking, do I even want this? You stop trying to be understood by people who have never taken the time to understand you. And you start honoring your own clarity first. You stop shrinking to fit in spaces that were never designed for your growth. And you start creating space for yourself wherever you go. And again, let's be real. Stepping into that kind of energy is not always comfortable because, again, it's going to require you to unlearn the version of you that was overly accommodating, overly available, and overly concerned with being liked, accepted, or kept. It requires you to sit in your own authority without constantly looking for approval. And that's a different kind of confidence. It's quiet, but it's solid. Spark Motive, welcome in, bro. It means that you're going to have to move differently in relationships. You're not going to, ignore these red flags just because you feel a connection. You're not going to overextend yourself just to prove your worth. You're not going to stay in spaces that require you to question your value, because when you know that you're the center, you don't chase alignment. You recognize it. And if it's not there, you don't force it. There's also this level of responsibility that comes with this, because once you acknowledge that you are the center, you can't keep blaming everybody else for everything that happens in your life. And that doesn't mean that the people around you, don't hurt you or situations don't impact you. It just simply means that you take ownership to how long you stay, to what you will and won't tolerate, and how you move forward. It means you stop giving people power over your peace, especially peace that you haven't even fully claimed yourself. So I want to say this with love, because I think, this is where it really lands for us. You are not powerless in your life. You might not be able to control everything, but you absolutely have control over how you show up. You have control over what you will accept. And you have control over when you decide something is no longer aligned for you. So acting like, you're the center doesn't mean that you have to become selfish in a harmful way. It just simply means that you become self-led. It means that you move with more awareness, more intention, more alignment. It means that you stop abandoning yourself to maintain connections that don't honor you. It means you trust that even if something doesn't work out, that you'll be okay because you're standing on you. And that's the kind of trust that nobody can take from you. Not rejection, not disappointment, not uncertainty. Because even in those moments, you know that you're going to show up for you in a way that you never did before. So now the question becomes, how are you going to start acting like you're the center of your own life? Not just thinking it, not just agreeing with it, but actually living it. Because once you do, you stop moving from a place of lack and you start moving from a place of alignment. And when you're aligned, you don't have to force anything. You don't have to chase anything. What's for you will meet you where you are, and what's not will fall away without you even having to fight to hold on to it. And that right there is what trust feels like. So as we close, I want you to take another deep breath in through your nose. Exhale from your mouth. This conversation wasn't just a conversation about trust. This was another mirror. We talked about the moments we've ignored ourselves, the times we've stayed longer than we should have, the ways that we've showed up for everybody else while slowly disappearing in our own lives. And the truth that maybe it wasn't just about them hurting us. It was about the moments that we stopped choosing ourselves. And listen, there's no shame here, because you were doing the best that you could with what you knew, with what you felt, and, what you were trying to hold together at the time. But now you know differently. Now you know better, right? You're more aware. But understand that your awareness now comes with a decision. Because when you really sit with everything that we unpacked today, it all comes back to this one truth. Right in the middle of trust is you. Not them. Not their consistency, not their potential, not their promises. You. Which means that your peace was never supposed to be built on whether or not somebody else gets it right. It was always supposed to be built on whether or not you showed up for yourself. Have an amazing day, Cynthia. Thank you. So moving forward, this is the shift. You don't ignore what you feel just to keep the peace. You don't explain away red flags just to hold on to potential. You don't overextend yourself just to feel valued. You don't abandon yourself to maintain access to someone who can't meet you where you are. Moving forward, you pause. You check in. You listen. And then, only then, do you move accordingly. Even when it's uncomfortable. Even if it's inconvenient. Even when it means letting go. Because choosing yourself is not always easy, but it is always necessary. And let me say this before we close, because I feel like somebody needs to hear this. You are allowed to trust yourself again. Even if you've made a decision that you regret. Even if you've stayed too long. Even if you ignored your intuition more times than you can count, that does not disqualify you. It just means that you have evidence now. Evidence of what doesn't work. Evidence of what you deserve. Evidence of what your spirit has been trying to show you all along. And now you get to do something different with that. So here's what I want you to take with you. The next time something feels off, pause. The next time you start over-explaining, pause. The next time you feel yourself shrinking just to hold on to something or someone, pause. Ask yourself, am I choosing me right now? And if the answer is no, that is your opportunity, not to be perfect, but to be intentional. If this episode spoke to you, go ahead and drop some green hearts in the chat. Let that be your way of saying, I hear myself again. Make sure that you like, comment, and share this out with someone who needs a reminder. Because I think that a lot of people are out here trying to trust others without learning how to trust themselves first. And for those of you who are ready to go deeper, in your healing, your boundaries, or your self-care journey, come join us. Visit our website at theselfcareclub.org. This is a space where you don't have to figure it all out alone. We are healing in community, growing one breath, one moment, one day at a time. I invite you all to join our Room2Breathe project community powered by school. Again, you can access it from our website at selfcareclub.org, or you can click the link in my bio for more details. And I just want all of you to know that you are not too late. You are not too far gone. And you are not too broken to come back to yourself. Today is the day that we choose to return to center. Now, before I go, let me leave you all with a little love and light. As always, I am here to encourage you to keep breathing through the highs, the lows, and every single moment in between. I want you to keep choosing peace, even if it feels out of reach. And know that here at the Self Care Club, you will always be seen, always valued, and always supported. So don't be afraid to speak your truth, to take up space, and to make a little room for you to breathe. I love each and every one of you to life. And I am praying that your day is not just amazing, but aligned, intentional, and yes, on purpose, filled with purpose. This has been another Room to Breathe podcast, and I cannot wait to connect with you all again soon. Thank you.